we're probably in for a bad market. And then, everything, gets affected by that. The capital gets hard to access. The big companies move away from their innovation projects and move back towards husbanding their cash and trying not to go out of business. And so I think that's probably the bigger sort of change out of COVID. And again, I hope I'm wrong and that we have a short, sharp V-shaped recovery, but it sure seems like, given all of the leading indicators, that it'll be painful.
Yeah, so I hope Eric is wrong too, because from where I sit, I actually think COVID has accelerated adoption of things like, or the idea of central bank digital currencies, for example, and that's an important space for the blockchain and cryptocurrency community. It's accelerated adoption of blockchain in the trade finance space, and some other areas, supply chain. So so we're seeing kind of more discussions in Europe, especially in some countries in Asia, because of not only Libra, Facebook coming out with the Libra stablecoin and cryptocurrency, and them recently launching their second white paper. They just announced their new name, Novi. And then China doing their central bank digital currency. It's brought, and it's all kind of, and then with COVID, all of that movement has led towards advanced discussions in the central bank digital currency space, which is a good sign for us in the crypto and blockchain stablecoin area. So
Shady,
that continues.
Since you brought up central bank digital currency, could you talk about what that is for audience and what is going on internationally?
Yes, sure. So this is not a new area. I mean, we've been talking about digital currencies in some sort since like the 70s, but because of the advancements in technology, and because of certain countries moving forward with different types of formats in their digital currencies, it's accelerated the kind of discussion on what would this entail. So digital fiat currency is what we're talking about, minted and burned by a central bank. There is there's all this terminology around it. There's wholesale CBDC and there's retail CBDC. And so consensus is focused more on the retail CBDC, which is the central bank having the ability to issue digital cash to businesses and individuals directly. And however, we think that our thesis is that most countries will continue to operate with this two-tiered distribution model of having banks and other service providers be that intermediary, because they don't want to hold the accounts, be responsible for so many accounts at the central bank, but that they want to continue this two-tier distribution model, but that in times of crisis, having an option like CBDC is a useful tool to reach those that are underserved and in need of this relief in the small businesses and individuals. So that's kind of where the conversation is right now. And it's taking different forms, and the policy discussions are continuing every day. Every single day, there's something in the news about this topic. So be on the lookout.
Thank you, Shady. So Itamar and Eric, what do you think of this CBDC, and how does this CBDC make an impact in fintech in the future?
Itamar, you want to go? I'm happy to take a first swing.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm a little suspect, to be honest. Part of the reason why I bought my first Bitcoin, back when I did that, was I thought, currencies fail. In the last century, we've seen, several dozen times that currencies that are sponsored, by sovereign nations fail. And, because they lack, discipline in their central banking function within the country that leads to these kinds of failures. And you see even countries like the US, where the central banking system is pretty robust and relatively isolated from the political system, that the political system really wants to reach over there and control it. And they want to do things that might be in their best short-term interest. And so part of the allure of digital currencies in my mind was the separation from breaking the fiat part. And so when I hear that a central bank is going to then I like, well, okay, how much extra value are you creating by removing the banking tier in the country? And are you really solving a problem that the end users have? I get that, sure, the IRS would like to be able to track every transaction. And so there are some things that the issuing country would like about digital currencies because of their ability to see every single transaction. But does it solve a problem that I, as a holder of currency, have?
Yeah. So I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to cryptocurrency and specifically decentralized currencies. So I'm going to think about this more with my consumer head, I guess. I think systematically we're looking at increased levels of distrust with currencies globally, as I'm thinking about this primarily as an investor, with so many central banks just printing money left and right. So I do see some benefits that some of the cryptocurrencies are offering to kind of potentially have more stability around the specific currency that they offer. But I still think I'm with Eric mostly in this, where I'm a little bit more skeptical about whether we're actually trying to solve a real problem, and then what is the real problem we're trying to solve. And is it more of a marginal pain point, or is it significant to the point that central banks will actually adopt those new ways of doing business at the expense, we know, of probably vulnerabilities or difficulties early on that might actually make things worse for some of those participants in the programs that you mentioned. So I'm a little bit more skeptical, but I guess I'm not an expert, and I'm very much open to be convinced that that's the right path forward.
Awesome, thank you. So let's go back to a little bit of our situation in tech in the context of the last two recessions back in 2001 and 2008. What did you see happen in the last two recessions to serve as a reference point for what may happen here? What happened the other two times in the industry? What's different? What's the similarities?
You want to go first this time, Itaman?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So like every time around, this time is different, I believe. And we don't know to what extent it is different, right? So we'll learn over time. But I'd say if we assume that there's going to be a long recession and that the consumer demand is going to drop, it's going to drop across the board, right? Across every vertical, across every industry, because that's how recessions go. I do think that this time around, especially if I compare this to 2008, and even more so if I compare it to 2000, where honestly I was just a kid that started his first startup back in 2000, so I didn't really know what's going on, but learned the hard way. I think this time around is different. So you are seeing that tech is actually helping us power through getting out of the COVID-19 state. You're seeing tech making a significant difference. You're seeing an array of companies that are fully digital tech companies that are maybe not significantly benefiting from this because this is bad for everybody, but are not hurting as much as traditional companies, non-tech companies, right? And you also see it in the indexes, right? Look at where the Nasdaq is today compared to where the S&P is today, or even venture out to China. And I think in China in the last couple of weeks, we've seen their tech indexes actually eclipse the pre-COVID state they were at. So it traded at a higher rate than January and February. And I think China is kind of leading the charge in getting back to normality. And what Chinese retail investors are saying is, we believe this is actually an opportunity for a lot of tech companies. And I think that is the case, again, at a high level. But again, going back to where I started, if this is a long recession, this is not a V-shaped recovery, then everybody's going to hurt some. It's just a question of who hurts more or less, depending on the situation in the market and what kind of products and services they're offering.
Yeah. I mean, so I was an active venture investor in the dot-com crash and active during the Great Recession. And it's just difficult to put into words how badly that sucked. I mean, it was bad, right? It was not, oh, it was 10% harder to get your Series B done, and it took you, 3 months instead of 2. No, it was like the amount of capital that was flowing in the ecosystem was reduced by a factor of 3 to 5, right? So you had good, promising companies that just simply could not access capital and went out of business. And so that's like the gigantic first order issue is like there's just the money spigot turns off, and then you have secondary issues and tertiary issues. But I think at the height of the analysis, the first order bit is like you just can't get cash, and it's across the board. You can't get it from your venture investors. Your customers, start churning on you faster. They're harder to land. Just everything gets harder. And so and again, I hope I'm wrong, but what I feels like is in that moment where Wile E. Coyote chases the Roadrunner out over the edge of the cliff and is standing out there in the middle of the air, and gravity hasn't started working yet because he hasn't realized he's standing in the middle of the air. I feel like that's where we are right now. And then as soon as we look down, gravity, and we start going down. And again, I hope I'm wrong, but that's what it feels like where we are in this moment.
Yeah, I'll just add to that because I'm not coming at this from a VC perspective. I'm coming at this from a blockchain startup business development perspective. The industry has grown so much, specifically the blockchain industry and fintech in general. And back in 2008, Bitcoin was born. People say it's a result of the financial crisis that happened. But since then, 2015 came Ethereum, and then you have multiple currencies after that, and full on ecosystems, right? The Ethereum ecosystem, and this is just the second largest after the Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, but Ethereum has like over 400,000 developers globally, right? And so we've got a large community, lots of startups building. We've got JP Morgan using, Quorum, which is built on Ethereum. We've got Wells Fargo and JPM having their own coins. We've got central banks, which, to kind of go back to you don't see the reasons. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why this community was born. But in general, you've got mature conversations happening around blockchain and tokenization and decentralization today that you didn't have in 2008, which makes my job a lot easier. And I'm talking to people, I don't have to explain the 101 of blockchain anymore to my customers. I have more mature customers coming to me. There's more demand for this. And you've got Congress citing it. You've had Maxine Waters talking about the digital dollar in one of her stimulus packages, right? And it was taken out. I'm sure the banking lobbyists might have had something to do with it, but it's happening. It's happening underneath the surface. So it's fun times.
Thank you, Shady. Speaking of token, I want to touch upon about security token, because I was speaking with my friend who is an engineer in Japan, and a lot of major Japanese banks are looking at the security token, and 12 countries in European Union are working on it. And are those international activity going to impact the existing fintech landscape? What's our future around this security token in the US and worldwide?
That's a very good question. In the US, I can't speak to every country or worldwide, but it is the future. Digital assets are the future. That's where the fintech space is going, because you already see future business models kind of thinking of security tokens as like a baseline, right? Underway. So in the US, the regulations are very complicated, and it's kind of why Consensus is a strategic partner of the Department of Commerce, because we are trying to support the competitiveness of the US blockchain industry globally. And regulation is a big barrier, I think, in the US right now. But you do have some movement. You had Hester Peirce come out and talk about this kind of grace period right now that we have, where I can't remember the exact words, but she talks about utility tokens and the different types of tokens within a network, and seeing and open to different types of models. And I would say, I think that's all I could say right now. Is I think it is the future. Policy is advancing, and if the US doesn't catch up, it will not be a financial leader as it was in the past. It'll take time for this space to move, but once it does, regulations will be a barrier if countries don't catch up.
Anything to add, Eric and Itamar?
Probably not allowed to add on my end, so maybe Eric wants to jump in.
I think I will always circle back to the same fundamental question of like, what problem are we addressing? What constraint are we relaxing? And the old story was, hey, it's going to allow for these really cheap transfers. We're going to move from, it used to cost you this insane price to move, money from euros to dollars, and somehow transfer-wise is able to, I'm making my capital calls that are denominated in euros, and they charge me $10, and it's like, it's a really small fraction of the total check. I'm a $10,000 check, and they're charging me $10. So it's like, wow, somehow the regular old, digital world has figured out how to do that reasonably cheaply. And so, okay, would I rather be $1? Sure. But am I going to move from, from this one that works to another one to go from 10 to 1? Probably not. So, that's what I'm always going to circle back to. It's like, what problem are we addressing?
Yeah, I think you're right, Eric. And there was just a question that came up in the chat from Thomas, who said, would you agree that we still haven't seen the killer app for cryptocurrency? And I'm honestly mostly on that camp, right? So I, for example, invested in Abra, which is one of the leading, digital wallets out there today. And the company was actually started in order to help with remittance of money, let's say from the US to the Philippines. People working here and they want to be able to send money back to their families at home. So for those type of use cases, when I think about blockchain and the decentralization and all the other properties of technology, I can see how this could be somewhat of a better infrastructure. So reduce costs, maybe, get more trust in the system. And I think that's important. I think that's big. And I think that needs to be embedded in the financial services system. But I'm a little bit hesitant to say that there's like multiple killer apps change our behavior. It feels like better, smarter way of doing things in a lot of different financial services use cases where you're trying to take one digital asset and moving from point A to point B, some type of manipulation. I can see how blockchain is really helpful there, but it feels more like a better, faster, maybe more reliable version of things, which I think is very helpful, versus a completely new revolution of killer apps that we've never seen before that are now powered by crypto. That I don't see yet.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, and I haven't watched it that closely. And Shaylee, maybe you have like the example of like the most successful great thing. But I've yet to see something where it's like, wow, here is where it's filling a real need that wasn't filled before.
Yeah, I'll just give an example. So the reason blockchain is you can have programmable money and you can program the compliance into day-to-day things, right? And you have the immutable records, right? But the trade finance example, right? We were working on a platform called Comgo with 15 banks and corporates. And this is a private permission platform which took the letter of credit in trade finance from 10 days to 1 hour. Okay. and this is with Shell, and this is for energy trade with Shell, BNP Paribas, Societe Generale, Citi, the different, like a bunch of different banks. Now that product, it's just digital documents, right? These are just digital documents. But I think the challenge is that people are so used to working in these silos of like, because they're scared to share information. But once they realize that you can have privacy and public permission platforms, you can have the settlement happen on a public blockchain and have all these different private ecosystems that are happening, that are kind of out there today, settle on to a public blockchain. So it's like a settlement layer, a web 3.0. And maybe that's not the answer you're looking for, but
I'm curious, like how much traction, how much dollar volume have they got going through that?
well, they've only settled, they've only transferred $1 billion just on that platform. It was born in December 2018, the actual solution, but it started with 15 banks and corporates, and 100 more have joined recently. So it's collaboration tools in the form of like reg tech, sort of. It's boring back-end infrastructure and the manufacturing of assets and money. It's very boring, basic stuff, but it's going to save money and time.
Thank you, everyone. It's very exciting time, and we have so much to discuss, but we are running out of time. So I want to make sure to touch upon important question for startups. So Itamar, you've been investing for a long time, and will startups be able to close funding right now in the near future? How do you suggest any startup founders prepare their businesses to be able to survive if they are planning on raising money this year?
Well, so that's a lot of questions packed into one. So let's start from the obvious. Clearly, those are unprecedented times, and things have changed. There's a lot of differences and nuances in the entire fundraising process that I'm seeing. And the most natural starting point is the haves and have-nots, right? There's companies that are severely impacted by COVID, specifically verticals like travel, hospitality, events, right? There's those verticals that really are at a much tougher spot. And if your company is in one of those verticals, you probably need to think long and hard about what is not just the immediate impact of COVID, but also what is the long-term structural change to your business model that might come out of that. And I think if you don't come prepared with that line of thinking, you're going to have a hard time talking to investors, because investors do recognize that the world has changed. If you're in a category of companies that is sort of slowed down by the pandemic, and maybe your business is on hold and maybe you're burning more cash, but you haven't really structurally changed as a business, right? Your business model is still going to be pretty much the same post-COVID, then you're likely at a better spot. But like Eric is saying, it's getting more and more difficult to raise capital. Now, what we're seeing now in venture capital is we're coming into this unprecedented times with a lot of money under management in the VC asset class. And I'm not just talking about SoftBank Vision Fund. There's so many funds that have raised so much money recently, actually some of them on the back of SoftBank Vision Fund, saying, hey, we need more money, more capital in this asset class, right? And that is actually, with that, entrepreneurs are pretty fortunate, because there's a lot of capital out there that is looking for the right opportunities in VC, and folks are still active. Have things slowed down in terms of funding in most of the rounds that I'm involved in, which is institutional seed, Series A, Series B? Absolutely. It's hard to get partnerships together. Investment decisions takes more time. There's a lot of scrutiny around the impact on the business because there's a lot of unknowns due to COVID. So it's more difficult, but the capital is there, and the right and good companies are going to find it now. So that's one thing. The last category is, I would say, and I've just had one portfolio company, which I more recently invested in just a year ago, a company called Deal, DWEL, which does payroll and compliance for remote teams, right? So some companies are in that category where it's actually very beneficial for them, and they're looking forward to potentially, a more significant change in their business model because of COVID. Those companies have, with some firms, some VCs on Sandhill actually have an opportunity to have them explore that today, where before COVID, they might not have even picked up the phone, right? So for those companies, I usually advise, hey, really think long and hard about what are the advantages for you. Why is this a great time for you to scale this company now, and when we, go back to whatever normality is going to be after COVID, and try to really portray that. But I'll leave you with one tip that is almost driving me crazy in day-to-day deal flow. Every single company that I talk to is saying COVID is amazing for us, and you know what? I just don't buy it.
Right. Anything
I totally agree with that counsel. I mean, I think if you're a startup and you look at your projections and you say, okay, assume my churn goes up 30% and my sales efficiency goes down 30%. Can I still get to cash flow break even on the capital I have in the bank? And if you're part of that 10% where the answer is yes, you should go on offense and you should try to really dominate your category. If you're part of the other 90%, you should recognize that fact and go on defense and survive through this. And in either way, I think raising capital now will be easier than it will be a quarter from now, which in turn will be easier than a quarter after that, which in turn will be easier than a quarter after that. Unless I'm totally wrong and there's this V-shaped recovery, goodness breaks out, which again, I hope happens, but I don't think will. And so I think that would be my advice is like raise capital if you can, cut your costs, focus on the core of your business. Now, unless you're part of that 10% that can actually get to cash flow neutral, this is not the time to be a hero. This is the time to keep your company alive.
Thank you. Shady, you want to add something? Do you want the advice to startups?
If you have a paycheck and you're working for a startup, be happy, kind of like what Eric said. I'm happy to have a job and still do something that I believe in the fintech space, and it's nice, and just keep at it. Work your pipeline even harder than you did before. Like, go take every meeting, talk to every lead. That's the best you can do.
Awesome, thank you. We have a couple of questions. Do I still have time, Anna? What's the best way to reach out to explore collaborating?
You mean with VCs? That would be naturally with a warm intro from somebody who knows both me and the person who's trying to get intro to me well.
Yeah, I agree. If it's a cold intro, somebody just reaching out, if it's a perfect fit for me, I will respond. If it's not, like, there are so many reach outs. Every day I get like 10 of people who want money to rent a car to become an Uber driver, right? I mean, there's just so much stuff that is like hard to filter through.
All right. Next question. What about Tezos coming up with smart contract better than Ethereum?
I am not the best person to answer that question, so I'll just plead the fifth on this one. And but I'm sure Consensus has a blog on it somewhere, so check it out. Do some research, and I'm sure there's some Reddit, like subreddit thread on this.
My observation is that it's a little bit like when the laser was invented. It was like a solution to a problem that no one had yet identified. Like, again, circling back to like, what is the problem you're solving? I'm a huge believer in starting with the customer need first and then building the solution rather than the technological innovation and then like, oh, where can we apply it? That second way, I have a hard time dealing with.
Well, I have to say this. Do you remember when you used to have to spend so much money to call people internationally? And now we have voice over IP and we can talk to anyone we want in the world for free. Well, Facebook is using a blockchain-esque stablecoin to do WhatsApp-based payments to anyone, and it's going to be really, really cheap or free. And so I think like this is the type of innovation that's coming with blockchain and blockchain-like technologies, distributed ledger technologies, is around.
Tencent did that in China without any blockchain like 5 years ago. okay, great. The technology can help you do it, but that's not a requirement for addressing the customer need problem.
Yeah, I'd say even more general, and I'm bullish on cryptocurrency in the future. I've been investing in Bitcoin as a personal investor for the last at least 6-7 years, and I understand the benefits. One thing that really is kind of hard for me to understand is usually when the conversation switches to cryptocurrencies, the conversation is about, what this thing can do, or the properties or assets or capabilities, and how awesome that is. And I get that, but I'm like Eric, I'm missing what is the problem that you're fundamentally solved that can't be solved. And by the way, if crypto does it 10% better, maybe we don't care. Like, it depends. Sometimes it's a big deal. Sometimes, if you can save me 10% of remittance costs, then I bet a lot of people here that want to wire back money to the Philippines would care. It's good. You have, maybe a way to enter the market and make an impact, but it doesn't feel like an enabler for something completely new yet. And in a lot of areas, it feels like we're talking about how cool the solution is. And I don't know if anybody cares, because there's already existing solutions and maybe they're good enough. So that's one thing that I'm missing in the crypto discussion. And I'm getting involved. I just invested in a friend's company called Give Bitcoin. It's a great way to introduce people to become Bitcoiners and start investing in Bitcoin as a saving program, right? It's like long-term, 5-10 years, low fees, just start to get an introduction to what investing in crypto might be for you. I think that's smart, and I think that could work, but I'm hearing a lot of solutions and not a lot of problems this thing is solving. And I want to find a way to switch the dynamics in the conversation to that.
That's a very interesting point, Itamar. I like it. So he touched upon a little bit about global solution. Eric, can you talk about PayJoy?
Sure. This is not crypto or blockchain.
Yes, I know, but I want to, hear.
This is an angel investment I made that was subsequently backed by Union Square and then Greylock. So they basically invented some firmware you can put into a phone that allows them to turn the phone into a brick remotely if you haven't been current on the payment associated with the loan to buy your phone, but it could be extended to other loans. And so it fills a need between the people who have credit and the kinds of loans you can make where there's a repossessable asset like a car or a house or something. So in a lot of the world, the most valuable asset that people own is their phone. And it's a few $100s worth of hard costs that they've outlaid. And so it creates a way to fill a spot that is in between that sort of good credit and repossessable asset that is a gigantic need in the third world. And there's still a big need here in the United States, but mostly a outside US kind of phenomenon. And that's where they're seeing most of their traction to date has been in Central America and South America and other countries of emerging economies.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, lots of things happening internationally, and we are running out of time. And anybody else wants to add anything? Do you want to give advice or any comments from today? All right, it's like, do you have any questions? Are we good? So thank you everyone to joining our panel discussion. Itamar, Shady, Eric, it was so pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So we are now moving to the pitch portion of our event. Before I introduce our startups, I want to cover the format of the pitch. Give me 1 second. There we go. So each startup, and today we have two, has 4 minutes to present. And then the judges have 4 minutes as a group to ask questions. Lastly, the judges have 4 minutes to give feedback. Okay, so let's start. First, we have Al Andrejas with CoilPay.
Hi, everybody. Let me just share the screen real quick. There we go. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Elias and I'm the co-founder of Coil. So what is Coil? Coil is a smartwatch bought by banks in bulk and issued for free instead of plastic cards. So did you know that 83% of Generation Z would like to pay with a wearable, but only 14% of them actually owns one? So all of the Apple Watches, all of the Fitbits, all of the smartwatches out there are only 14%. So that leaves 69%, almost 70% of the market completely untapped, almost 1.6 billion people. So why is that? Well, because the current solutions are really expensive, with Apple Watch coming in at $400, and the cheapest one and the cheapest wearable you can pay with is a Fitbit, currently at $159. And we're targeting banks because they don't have enough differentiating products to differentiate one bank from another bank, and are currently really desperate to innovate because they're being destroyed by fintech newcomers like Revolut and 26, Venmo, Apple coming on with their card, and they're really struggling to retain Generation Z customers. So now you're going to ask, why not just pay with a phone? Everybody has a phone. Yes, everybody can pay with their phones, but they're not paying with their phones. Only 24% of iPhone users actively use Apple Pay, and 80+% of Apple Watch users actively use Apple Pay on their watches. So this is a big opportunity for banks to get new customers from other banks. They can retain the old customers from switching to fintechs, and on top of all of that, they can increase transactions. So we currently have 3 sign-up bank partners in Europe, with 23 total banks in the pipeline. We will deploy around 150,000 devices in this year alone, and the current pipeline in interest is around 10 million devices. We're looking to raise 2.5 million to deploy with the first banks, and this is our team. We're really experienced entrepreneurs with multiple exits, McKinsey managers, bank presidents, and our CPO built Apple Pay, Garmin Pay, Samsung Pay, pretty much any pay you can think of. And our advisors are C-level Pinterest employees, Stanford professors, IIM professors, and high-level Philips employees. So let me tell you a little bit more about Coil, what you can do with it. So it's a full-on smartwatch. You can answer jack calls. It has all the fitness tracker capabilities. It has app creation capabilities, app capabilities, but because it was built with payments in mind, it has a lot of unique features that you're not going to find anywhere else. So of course, you can swipe through cards, you can check balance, you can get card recommendations depending on the location. You can see analytics. You can review payment history. You can share your bank accounts with other people. You can suggest budgets. You can load all of your access cards to it, and you can always pay with it, even when you run out of battery. And you can see, even when we compare it to the best in class, you can see that because it was built for payments, there are a lot of unique features that you're not going to find anywhere else. So let me tell you a little bit more about the first financial health bracelet. Well, because we sell to banks, we had to build the whole ecosystem. It's not just the device. It's comprised out of Coil Pay, which is a proprietary contactless platform in a box for banks that do not have one, and it allows seamless integration with any existing bank payment solution. And Coil Dev, it's essentially a development solution for Coil wearables and app store for Coil One users. So I was talking about apps before, and let me tell you a little bit more what type of apps you can run on this device. So for this, for the first time, banks can now leverage their customer risks to create meaningful partnerships with third-party brands and create a deepen relationships with their customers. And they can build apps like club memberships, Metro cards, budgeting. They can even do partnerships with Uber, if this then that, and so on and so on. So market is really big. It's 200 billion right now, and it's just going to quadruple in the next 5 years. And it's growing with a faster rate now, more than ever. We expect to deploy around 5 million devices in the next year and a half. And we make money from device sales. We take a cut from each payment. And of course, we make money from apps and add-on services. So if you would like to know more, please do not hesitate to ask. And if you would like to see the device, how it works, I would be glad to show it to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Al. Judges?
We're gonna go in
We're
order.
gonna get going on this one first.
Guys, come on. Just
Well, I'll start.
Sorry.
So is the bank supposed to sell this to the end customer for $15 to $20?
No, it's
Are
free.
they your
right?
distribution channel?
Yeah, so it's free, right? So banks, they buy it from us and they issue it for free instead of plastic cards.
And your kind of value proposition pitch to the banks is what? Like acquiring new customers, engagement of existing Gen Z customers, increased transaction. Like, why would the bank actually bother with all this? How is it making their core business better?
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? So with this, right, banks can now, they have access to their users' risks for the first time, so they can engage users in a way that they couldn't do it before. And because people tend to spend more if they see exactly how much money they have, and with this solution, banks can offer them solutions on the risks that they couldn't offer them before, in a sense that microloans, right? So you want to buy shoes, you only have $80. Here you go. You can borrow $20 from a bank, to buy the thing you really like.
We're very short of time, so let me ask you one very precise question. What is the one KPI or the one value proposition that a bank should look at when they look at this and say, we should really do this?
Okay, so they're actually looking at two of them, right? So do we actually increase transactions? And the second one is, are we getting in new customers, right? Are we getting in new Generation Z customers? So those are the two metrics that banks are looking at right now.
Got you. Very helpful.
So if I have 5 cards from banks in my wallet, or you're my wife and you have 10 in your purse, does that mean you'd have like 5 or 10 of these up your wrist?
So that's a great question. So no, of course not. So this really depends on the bank, right? So a bank can allow you to load other cards to it, or they can say, what? No, you can only have our bank's card to it. And what they can do, if they would allow you to do this, we actually had this discussion with one bank. So what they suggested they would do is they would front load their card to it. So you will always pay, let's say with Bank of the West card, but then you can backload all of the other cards, and then they charge those cards. So the transactions only go through the Bank of the West card, and that's it, right? So all of the money is siphoned through Bank of the West. I'm not saying we talked this with Bank of the West. I'm just saying, this is just an example. So they can either choose to do this or not. And
maybe this is getting too long, but what prevents, say you go through all of this trouble, you show that there's a market demand and it's big. What prevents any of these banks from turning to someone else and saying, well, we would like to, use you as well, and sort of you end up with a bunch of comparable and substitute solutions in the marketplace?
Well, that's another great question. So the thing is, there isn't. So you have solutions out there, right? There are like a Fitbit and Apple Watches and others, right? But all of those solutions, they have different business models. They sell B2C, right? So their devices are really, really expensive. And if a Fitbit would go and sell to a bank, their price, or if a bank would go and buy Fitbits, the price for that device would be really, really expensive. It would be $140, which is not the money that banks would like to spend per customer. So if you're looking at Apple Watches, that's $400. Our solution was designed so that we sell almost at cost to the banks, because we found different ways to make money, like payment. We take a cut from each payment, and we integrate with the bank itself. This is the first solution in this manner that we integrate with the bank on the level that we do. You actually control the wearable through the bank's app. So there is nowhere there is no solution on the market that does that currently. But I'm not saying that somebody is not going to pivot or do something like this once we prove out the market, which is essentially a brand new market. And on the other hand, I don't think Apple would do this because it's brand dilution. They would.
But all of the Fitbit copycats who are having difficulty staying afloat, like, oh wow, if that one's working, let's go talk to some banks and see if we can make one that's like that.
Yeah, well, I think if they would, everybody can do everything if they put their money, and their heads into it. But making a payment wearable for that is safe and secure, it's not as easy. That's why all of the wearables right now are expensive, because there is not a lot of experts in that field so that they would help them do that. So it's also our proprietary solution. We had to figure out how to build a wearable that is good enough for people to use en masse, to have the AMOLED screen and everything, and be able to support all of the access cards and all of the payment cards in that sense. So this is and of course to build an app ecosystem behind it where people can go and start building apps for it. So it's not a small solution.
That might be your key defensibility hinge, right? Like if you use the bank as the distribution channel, and then you get to have a direct relationship with the consumer.
Exactly.
Otherwise, they can the bank, if you're overly reliant on your bank channel, then they can always swap another vendor to run through their channel, and they will have a huge incentive to do so unless you have some direct relationship with the consumer through an app store or something like that.
That's exactly what
you're adding value that makes your solution more attractive than whatever other thing they could source.
That's exactly what we're doing, because we are talking with, right now we have 23 banks in the pipeline, and we are growing weekly. So every bank who is going to do partnerships with their partners in that region, all of the core users around the world will have access to those apps. So they're not just buying our wearable, they're buying the ecosystem of it. And our long-term goal is, you have to understand that banks, they don't buy 100 devices, they buy 100,000 devices. And our long-term goal is, to essentially be like an Android app store for payment wearables, where people can come in and build apps from outside and just lease our Coil OS and put it on their devices as well.
All right, guys. Well, Al, actually, there was one question from the audience. Have you solved the secure element issue implemented by the phone manufacturers?
Yes, we do. We have our own secure elements that we bought from a hardware manufacturer. We're actually talking with them right now. So yeah.
Okay, and judges, we are now in feedback.
Yeah, so I'll jump in really quickly. I would say I love what you're doing. I think it looks neat. I think the trend is right. I've had a less favorable experience with B2B2C models like this, where you have to go for the banks, you really need to win them over, and they need to, essentially win over their customers to be using something like this. It is a legitimate go-to-market, because we know the other options going direct to consumer are actually harder. Potentially, but at the same time, I'm hesitant to say this is a great model. You're really relying on those banks and financial services companies to really build a business. Like Eric said, they can switch you out pretty easily. You can become more of a commodity hardware kind of thing. Yes, you've got a lot of marketplace and interesting ideas there, which could get you out of the commodity state, but they're not necessarily core to what you're trying to do, which is solve payments with a wearable. So they might not have that big of an adoption, and then it's still easy to switch you out, and you're not really defendable in that business. And the last piece I kind of like less is that you don't have that direct line of communication. that direct, sort of brand recognition with your customers. I mostly invest in consumer fintech, and I think that's really where I see outliers, like companies that really work, is when they are able to build a strong brand with consumers, and consumers rely and trust them when it comes to financial decisions, which not an easy thing to do. But I think that's where you can really build like very, very big companies. And the way your model is set up today, you can maybe build a great services company for banks, but it's hard for it to scale to be a really big, valuable company. Doable, yes, just really harder. That's my feedback.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with that. That's really excellent feedback. And I especially, if you think about what comparable thing have banks been successful in selling through to their customers, right? And this is Itamar's point about B to C models, is a bank really good at selling through anything other than a
Actually,
financial product?
yes. So there is a product. It's called Pingit, and it was Barclays BPay formerly, and they actually sold through the roof. And it's not a smart device. It's essentially just a piece of leather with a card in it, one card. And they sold a lot of those. They sold 30,000 of those. And if you go on their website, and they sold it for $60+ each. And if you go on their website, you're going to find, a lot of them are sold out, and so on and so on. So it's this market is growing, and we figured out a way how to successfully go into this market with a smart wearable, with a smartwatch.
That'd be my main suggestion. Is I think that's the weakest part of the chain in your go-to-market strategy. And then, you've got 23 banks, whatever, signed up. Like, I wouldn't go too fast out there, because it's not a no-brainer that they will be successful in selling these through, right? I would expect some cycles of learning and some hand-holding you'll have to do, and some education you'll have to do, that you'll have to learn and then teach them. And so don't try to do 23 at parallel at once. You'll get overwhelmed by their lack of ability to execute. That it's better to focus on a small number and really make those ones be successful, and plan on cycles of learning around, like, the first things you try probably won't work. And the first things they try probably won't work. I think that's the near-term advice. I think the long-term advice is this whole thing about the moat, the defensibility, how you end up with that brand in the consumer hand. And maybe it's the App Store, maybe it's because you end up being the central point where 5 cards are stored, or 10 cards, or 50 cards, or whatever it is, whatever that key value proposition is, or it's that App Store, or something where you cannot be swapped out. Or when my bank number 2 sends me my free watch from a copycat competitor, even if it was free, I don't want it, because my friends have told me the coil is better for reason XYZ, and like the compelling reason why each incremental user of coil makes it a more valuable platform or ecosystem for the incremental, not yet to be launched or landed customer.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's why when we are launching with those banks, so we are launching with 3 banks in different territories. So we're launching with 1,000 devices with each bank. So 3 banks, each 1,000 devices in Europe, and 3 banks with 1,000 devices in the Middle East. That's why we have that, so that we'll see what marketing strategy works. How to approach customers. So even if one bank does not do a good job, we'll still learn what not to do.
If you get 1 out of those 6 who does a good job, you should count that as a huge win, and then push that learning out across everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, guys, we're out of time. So and thanks, Al, and thank you, judges.
Thank you.
So we're gonna move on to our next startup. It is Eric Lutit with Neocore. So there we go.
Cool.
Okay, is the screen, is my screen sharing working?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Well, thank you for the opportunity to introduce you to Neocore. Neocore is a SaaS startup company in the B2B enterprise technology space, offering a digital platform for software licensing. So maybe it's that company you were looking for with that breakthrough wow technology. So certainly our team, I have the pleasure of working with a really talented team of great professionals. I come from the background of 20 years, 25 years in the enterprise software space for large enterprise software companies like Oracle and IBM, and also successful startups, IPO, and an exit with Ultimate Software Group, as well as a couple other entrepreneurs. On our team, I mentioned some very great professionals. Is Chris White. He was the CIO and CFO at Safeway. And in our space, he's well known as someone who can optimize software costs and things. And our co-founder is Eric Karch from Google. We also have a top developer in Ethereum working for us, Yogesh, who is responsible for architecting and overseeing the development of the platform. We have a great team of advisors, likewise with deep industry experience and enterprise software. So we have, we're addressing the problems in the software space around the whole software ecosystem. It's broken today, and it's compounded by people working from home, having real extensive software licensing problems. So you have SaaS and cloud and user rights. I think Cisco has 1,000 different SKUs for their software. So organizations that acquire software have to manage it, inventory it, and license it properly to end users. So organizations have a real hard time at counting that inventory and doing it on a regular basis. In this space, there are software companies, B2B software companies selling these tools. It's a $2.5 billion industry that serves almost $1 trillion worth of software spend. Our platform is the first smart contracts-based platform that is an end-to-end solution for all the way through end users getting the software on their desktop. That's one of the best use cases, is an end user being notified, doing a authorization, getting their contract. Big benefits, big ROI, better than you can get from installing SAP. So 30% savings in knowing how you could track and trace your software, making the contracts accessible for all the parties. Right now, audits are really expensive. Companies like Autodesk, just in their last earnings call, had a $36 million worth of revenue from audits. So, I mean, it's a big space. We compete with some players in this space. One of the players is a PE-backed firm, Flexera. They have a nice product. We match up to them. We have a few competitive advantages over them. The part that I'm really intimate with is the go-to-market plan. I've been running software sales teams for my career. We've segmented our base. We're going after our initial customers. We have 3 channels we're selling through: the software publishers, directly to large enterprises, as well as through some enterprise business partners like KPMG and E&Y. We can't wait to put some points on the board and get to $100 million in scaling our SaaS business. So we're looking for partners and as well as investors that want to join us in this journey. That's it.
Wow, right on the dot. Judges, questions?
So obviously, good solid team like you would expect for going after this type of market. I'm considering, I guess, an open question around pursuing a space that's sort of relatively obvious need, that there are a lot of solutions out there already. You've mentioned a specific one that you're just going to be a little bit better than. Like, well, that sounds hard, right? Like they're already known in the marketplace. Presumably they've got an installed base. They've got sales process. They've got, stuff going. Any innovation that you do, you might surprise them a quarter or two and win a customer or two, but they're not going to be dumb. They'll respond. And so I guess what was lacking for me, at least in the pitch, is just sort of like what's new and different here that justifies you senior, experienced, good people chasing after this opportunity is one general question. I think in enterprise software, generally speaking, the defensibility comes from it just working and having referenceable customers and sort of brand. Again, but that's a lot easier to do when you're inventing a category than chasing after others who already have established something in the category. So maybe I'm missing something from the pitch, and maybe I should just stop there and ask what I'm missing.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the juicy part. In this space, and I didn't articulate it very well, in this IT asset management space, the existing solutions fall short at 60% of the time. So the software that a company thinks they own versus the software that the manufacturer thinks they sold them. So in the case of Autodesk, 35 customers last quarter thought they were properly licensed, but 200 customers were audited for misuse of the software and had to recount. So these existing solutions that they've deployed across all of these companies, large enterprises, we're going after replacing those using DLT so that they can properly track and trace it. And the single ledger then is for both the software publisher and the enterprises to share and have full transparency to see where all the transactions are for that software license.
And so the innovation is this shared ledger rather than the audit, which is a semi-hostile thing that the vendor does to their customers. And so they have to walk very carefully down that path, unless they're Microsoft and they just do whatever the heck they want.
Yeah, the friction is great in this business. When I was a software seller, I was accusing the chief buyer, my best friend, that they didn't have enough software, and he would constantly tell me he had millions of it that he didn't use. And yeah.
So that part, sorry, I didn't get that part from the pitch. It's like, this is the chief innovation of the reason why Neocore exists, is this shared ledger around what actually is there.
Right.
It's actually
better. I like the way you said that. Yeah, the shared ledger. Yep.
And if that's the case, then you're creating an opportunity for real differentiation and creating a new category, right? Like, and potentially defensibility and platform. You end up with a two-sided marketplace like aspect to your business, where there's Neocore is the one source of truth that we all trust. And so then you get more benefit, the more buyers of enterprise software on one side of your marketplace, and more benefit to everyone from more sellers on the other side of your marketplace.
Sounds good. Yeah, this play could grow into, we're not solving the problem, but it could grow into the type of consortium that you see blockchain used in. I mean, it could. In Europe, they're using this similar type of technology to tackle a problem with used software, where in the US, we're not able to resell used software, but and they're using tokens to do that in Europe, which is kind of cool.
All right, guys, we're moving into feedback. So Itamar, if you had any questions, included in your feedback, please.
Well, yeah, that sounds good. So very interesting. I like that it's focused on the more on the buyers of software, if I understand correctly, than the sellers, because the sellers have very specific acute needs around getting leads, and they're willing to pay for that. But that business model typically scales more on the advertising side or discovery side, which is valuable. But I think there's longer lasting value in being able to sell management software to the buyers of the software that need that help, kind of understanding what is really happening with their software assets. I'd say a couple of things that I would think through when I think about that. First of all, when we talk about audit and that kind of transparency, there's always one side that's very interested in that and another side that's not interested in that. So I try to understand where that really sits, and are you 100% aligned with your buyer and the decision maker in the organization that they actually need that? So that's one, and maybe the answer is yes, and I think that's great, and that could be a great differentiator for you guys. And I guess the other piece that I'm trying to think through is, like Eric said, there's a lot of different competitors here. For example, there's a lot of companies coming in from the contract management standpoint. And for the contract and the terms, they're trying to understand how the interaction looks. There's other players who are coming in more from the usage-based approach. It's like, we're consuming X software or X API services data. We need to pay. How do we do rating, billing, and understanding, usage and all that in a usage-based model? And even though there's convergence between some of those different narratives, they're not yet there. So like, every organization comes in with a mindset of like, I need more contract management. I need to reduce costs by, managing how much I consume from SaaS services A, B, and C. So typically a company would come up with that narrative. And I kind of want to see you address one narrative extremely well with one set of customers versus feel like something that feels much more generic the way you position it now, which I think works at later stage companies, but early on, you just want to really like hit it in the nails, like this one thing that really works, and there's a big market for that. I get a foot in the door, and then I expand with more asset management pieces. And I haven't fully heard that yet. I guess it's more like a go-to-market related, but I haven't really heard that in the pitch. And I think you need to refine that a little bit more at the institutional seat, and especially so at the Series A stage.
Great, thank you. That's good to know. Getting the pain part, the pain that the customers are having, and solving that pain with the right aspirin or the new type of aspirin.
Or even like helping us understand, who are those customers? How do you segment them? What characterizes them? What are the common type of issues that they're having that you're going to solve for them? And show me that that works consistently across a big set of customers. I think that will make it more appealing.
Or a day in the life of a representative customer who's already, sort of a committed POC partner of yours.
Thank you. Yeah, we have found two industries because of the COVID, universities as well as aerospace and defense. Universities in particular, if you know of any students that use a program called MathLab, they need to use MathLab in order to complete their course, get a PhD in data science. MathLab is widely misused. You have to install it on your Mac. But yeah, so we know of some use cases for universities that have the responsibility to manage what the students use. But yeah, okay. I didn't hear any feedback, and I would love to, about identity, because we think there's a big piece in identity, contract management, obviously, but then an identity on the end user side, because these companies license the software and then assume the end user is actually the person signing into this corporate application. So we think there's a big opportunity in the future to leverage other blockchain technologies that help the companies secure their data better via software licensing.
I would echo Itamar. Focus on the thing that you can do first, best, and do that. And then expand out as you go and build out the platform and build out the number of customers who are paying you money. One of my favorite quotes about startups is, more startups die of indigestion than starvation. They just try to eat too much.
Okay, interesting, yeah. Okay, we'll have to figure out the type of restaurant that we're gonna be, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, all right. So no more feedback, judges?
Just thinking about going to a restaurant makes me happy. So thank you.
Well,
I just got an email that our restaurant opened up in Saratoga, Dine Takeout, new app, so I'm happy.
Nice.
I'd like to stay in touch with you since digital identity is one of my theme, but please listen Eric and Itamar first.
All right,
you.
yep. All right. Okay. Yeah, I think that pretty much concludes our event today. Let's actually get Al back as well. And we did miss Shaylee, but let's take a group picture really fast. Dan, do you want to go?
I took my blue glasses off for that.
Hold on one second. Hold on.
I have started to wear these blue shades. They're phenomenal. You never get any tweaks in your eyes with these blue lenses. It's the best.
All right. I think he's gonna get ready. Got it? Just do the full screen instead of part. I think he was trying to see if he could
Stationary here.
actually remove the the edges of Zoom actually, but let's just do the whole thing and then we can always edit it later. Yeah. Okay. Up. Wow. No warning there. Okay. 3, 1, 2, 3. All right. There we go. Okay, guys. Okay, there was another one. All right, so judges, thank you so much for your valuable, insightful feedback. Startups, thank you so much for bravely sharing your ventures with us. And to the rest of you in the audience, thank you so much for joining us from the comforts of your home. So please watch out for our other events. We've got a ton this week and in the weeks to come. I would love to have you there. So everyone have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
No.